Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, and I'd like to thank my colleague for a line of questioning, and I'd like to continue that conversation with you if I could. Mr. Petty, thank you for coming to testify before us today and for working so tirelessly to make something positive out of your loss. I've heard from students up and down my state of Delaware. They've taken action today. I agree with you that we need to keep faith with that action. I just want to ask you, and Ms. Posada, if I might, given the law that was signed in Florida that tackles things a little bit from both sides, isn't bold, isn't big, doesn't do what I'd like to see, but makes some progress on the gun violence restraining order and 3-day waiting period, raising the age to 21 and banning bump stocks. Do you believe we should mirror the actions that were signed into law in Florida? Are there aspects of that you disagree with, or are there things you might support that would go beyond that?
It's a great question, and let me say one thing. There's the walkout movement. There's also a movement called Walk Up that I think should get equal airtime. The Walk Up movement is where students go and put their arms around another student that's having trouble or is alone or isn't eating it doesn't have anybody to eat lunch with them. And I would encourage the students to not only walk out but walk up. Without getting into specifics, Senator, there were things about that legislation that I personally disagreed with. There were things that other family members personally that they disagreed with. There was enough in common that we decided to set aside those differences and come together, and I think we made some change. That to me is the model for going forward. There are things on the edges we're always going to disagree with. If we can just come together and say, look, and I think Ms. Posada said it well, we've got to quit impugning the motives of the other side. There are deeply held beliefs on both sides, and just because somebody holds a particular belief doesn't make them a bad person. We have to talk to them. We have to listen to them. We have to find common ground, and we have to come together. There are a lot of things in front of this Congress that are common ground that should be done quickly, and then you can continue to debate the things that you don't have in common.
Thank you, Mr. Petty. And my concern is that we will do nothing. The bill that I referenced before that I introduced with Senator Toomey is a modest, reasonable, bipartisan effort to enforce existing law, to make sure that when someone tries to buy a gun who's prohibited, that information is shared with state and local law enforcement. There's a dozen other proposals here that I think we should enact. Otherwise, we risk sending the message to families like yours, to you, to teachers, to faculty, to these students from around the country that we're just not hearing them.
And I would absolutely support what you're proposing.
Ms. Posada, let me ask you the same question, and thank you for your testimony today and for your dedication to your students. My mother and grandmother both were public school teachers early in their careers, and I get a sense just how hard that job is. I also want to ask you a second question about school safety. There's a wide range of proposals from training teachers and arming teachers to trying to harden schools. There's a company run by a high school classmate of mine, Hardwire, that actually manufactures ballistic armor. And they deployed in one school district in my home state of Delaware, Colonial School District, with the help of State Senator Nikki Poore, clipboards and blackboards that look like any other clipboard or blackboard, so they don't create a heightened sense of instability or insecurity, but they are ballistic protective materials. So it would allow, in an unexpected event with a shooter, it would allow a teacher or students to possibly exit with something between them and the shooter. I didn't know if you had any views on whether what sorts of actions we should take to make schools safer, whether investing more in school counselors and mental health is the best path forward, whether equipping and training teachers is better, or whether these kinds of investments in school systems that would make them safer is best. I'd welcome your input.
Well, I think the problem with a lot of the proposals that have been made as far as arming teachers, what you just mentioned, those things that you just mentioned, the biggest problem that I see with those things is the cost. We as a nation seem to constantly be unable to invest in education, in the education of our children, but we're willing to spend millions of dollars on, arming teachers, for example. The bill that was just passed in Florida, I believe, allocates $67 million to the potential of arming teachers. When I know that the teachers in Broward County until this year hadn't had a raise for several years. So that's a large concern for me, that we seem to be willing to put lots of money towards things like that, but not towards education in general. I am personally strongly opposed to arming teachers. I think that it will pose much more of a danger on a day-to-day basis to teachers and to students. In fact, in the past few days, there has just been a teacher today in California accidentally discharged a gun in a classroom and injured a student. Yesterday, a teacher in Utah accidentally discharged a firearm and injured herself. These were trained teachers who were allowed to carry those weapons, and just in 2 days, these accidents have happened. So if we do this on a larger scale, I fear that those things would happen more and more. As far as the Kevlar bulletproof items, sure, that would be a good thing to be able to have, but I think investing in education in general is a much more important step for the nation as a whole.
Well, thank you, Ms. Posada. Mr. Petty, as Mr. Petty mentioned, making sure that we're investing in school environments where there's limits on bullying and where there's resources, teachers and others for counseling, so that those who are isolated or at the margins of school communities are more engaged, are more supported, is something that I would see real value in. Making schools safer places, but also investing more in our teachers strike me as great priorities. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for holding this hearing today, and thank you to all of our witnesses.